Hi, Anton. Hello. I can indeed. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Okay, sure. Yeah. I'm going to get rid of this. Camera off.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
No, not yet. Anton, I can't hear you.
Anton, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh boy, I've just been going on and on, thinking that people can hear me. Right, yo. So let me restart that then. We run these sessions on Startup Legal Q&A because unfortunately, over 90% of startups fail. And whilst the top three reasons are one, market fit, 2, running out of money, and 3, not having the right people. When it comes down to it, the legal side of things, it's the most undervalued and least understood and focused on by most startups, including yours truly. We've got 4 amazing specialists, legal specialists with us today that will help us navigate certain minefields that are required for us to protect our startup and what we built. The way we're going to do this, it's quite straightforward. We will go through some quick introductions, then we'll open it for questions from the audience. Sorry, actually, first introductions, then our lawyers and legal specialists will give us their do's and don'ts when it comes to early stage legalities. And then after that, we will start taking questions from the audience. Just remember, please, that unfortunately, we are unable to monitor your questions live if you are tuning in via the live streams, whether that's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. We are unable to monitor your questions there live. So please do go to our website, startup2scaleup.club. Look for today's session, which is Startup Legal Q&A 05. You click join, it's a quick registration. That gets you to our, it gets you an email really, to your, a link to your email, which will then let you join us here on Microsoft Teams. Once you're here, then all you have to do is drop your question in the chat. We'll give you the mic and you can fire away. Again, we are doing this as an official London Tech Week Fringe. So although London Tech Week is done for this year in terms of Olympia and the in-person events, we are still going strong. So a couple of things I guess to remember. Number one, there are literally no wrong questions and there's no need to be shy because it's a learning curve for us all. Today's questions can be on anything to do with UK startup law, and you don't need to be shy about it. What you do need to do is remember that we're only going to be here for the next 53 minutes now. So I wouldn't leave it for too late to ask questions. The best way to do that is to drop your question in the chat. We then give you the mic, and then you can, we give you the mic and then you can ask your question. Today, we're taking questions on anything from founder agreements to shareholder rights, IP protection, term sheets, compliance, regulatory requirements, non-disclosure agreements, perhaps employment law, legal documents, templates, contracts, co-founder or investor or board disputes, and all that jazz. If, however, your questions today are not on the legal side of running your startup, then please save them for the other events we run. Mondays, it's talent. Tuesdays, it's product and tech. Wednesdays, it's growth. Thursdays, it's fundraising. Second Friday of each month, it's UK startup law. And third Friday of each month, it's UK startup finances. Normally, they're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time. Apart from today, we're doing both legal and finances on Friday, so in one day. So as you can see, we're now doing legal at 11 a.m. and we'll be doing finances later on at 2 p.m. So without further ado, some quick intros. My name's Anton Cole. I'm an Albanian in London working with startups. Normally, right after they get investment, I embed within their teams and help them hire and keep the right people. I also do some growth advisory work with a few other startups and some accelerators. And lately, I've been helping some angels and family offices with their due diligence and assessments. We'll start with Ishita, then we'll go to Graham, and then we'll go to Andrew, and hopefully someone will join us soon.
Thanks, Anton. I think someone has joined. Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a good Friday. I'm Ishita Luthra, senior lawyer with Sprint Law UK. Sprint Law is an online law firm advising early stage small and medium businesses with their legals, right from startup to formalizing your business contracts, platform T's and C's, to fundraising, registering your trademarks, privacy policies, and you name it. We won a bunch of industry awards for legal innovation, and last year we launched our in-house AI lawyer, which you can access via the Sprint Law membership. I've also written a book called The Inner Circuit, helping founders and busy professionals get some peace and clarity without the need for therapy. And I'm excited to be here today and looking forward to having a great chat.
Hi everyone. My name's Graham Halliday. I'm a partner at Mara Harrison. We're a law firm in the City of London. I specialise in venture capital, and I work with both startups and growth businesses, all the way from inception through to funding rounds, all the way to exit. I also work with some of the most well-known venture capital funds in the UK and Europe, such as Balderson, Northzone, Excel. And we're generally sort of one of the most busiest law firms in London in terms of venture capital transactions. And we really pride ourselves on working with growth companies and helping them grow.
Thanks, Graham. My name is Andrew Pannell. I'm a partner in London at Haynesboon, focusing on the venture and private equity space. Haynesboon is a UK-US law firm. We're Dallas, Texas based, 19 offices out in the US, and then a growing presence in the UK. Within London, we focus on working with startups and scaling businesses, both in the context of the UK and also Europe, and where they're looking to expand out into the US. Like Graham, we also work with a lot of venture managers and private equity managers, both in terms of their downstream direct deals into the startups, but also when it comes to fund formation, structuring type work as well. I think Saman perhaps.
Thank you very much, Graham. Yes, Saman. Saman, can you hear us? Probably Saman can't. Let me see if I can make any changes to your. Where is Saman? Ah, that's right. Okay. Make a presenter. Let's try that again. Hopefully, it should work soon, Saman. Can you hear us now? Yes, you can.
Can you hear me now? Yeah,
Yes,
I was blocked from unmuting, so apologies for that, and apologies for joining slightly late. So I am Saman. I run a business where we place fractional general counsel, so experts in startup scale up, who work as your in-house legal team when you don't yet need a permanent hire, but you do need strategic legal support that we plug in on a part-time basis from 5 hours up to 4 days a week, whatever you might need. And we help you with the kind of building of the business, everything from commercial contracting, privacy, corporate rounds, working with partners, like we've just heard from, and then we scale the business with you until you no longer need us, hopefully because of a excellent exit or something like that. So nice to be here and looking forward to chatting to everyone.
That is brilliant. Thank you very much to all four of you. I can see quite a few people here, but also a lot more in the live streams. Just a quick reminder. First of all, thank you for joining us. But if you do want to ask us any questions, you are better off to join us here live on Microsoft Teams. It's audio only. So if you're like me, you don't need to spend a few hours in front of the mirror doing your hair. On the other hand, unfortunately, we can't monitor your questions live on the live streams, whether you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. So if you do want to talk to us, you'll need to come here onto our live audio call on Microsoft Teams. You should have links to that on most of those live streams, but perhaps the quickest way is to simply come to our website, startuptoscaleup.club. Look for today's session, which is Startup Legal Q&A 05. You click join. It's a quick registration. That gets you a link to your email. Through that link, then you can join us here on Microsoft Teams. When you're here, all you have to do is type your question in the chat. We'll then give you the mic and you can fire away with whatever question you have. And today we're helping founders navigate that legal minefield that protects your business from startup to scale up. So those legal questions can be on anything from, let's say, founder agreements, shareholder rights, IP protection, term sheets, compliance, regulatory requirements, NDAs, employment laws, legal documents, templates, contracts, co-founder or investor and board disputes and all that jazz. There literally are no wrong questions and there's no need to be shy. It's a learning curve for us all. We've got 4 amazing lawyers here with us today, and whilst we're not giving legal advice, we do give our opinions based on the experience we've had with similar stuff. And by the way, if your questions today are not on the legal side of startups, then please save them for the other conversations we run. Mondays, it's talent. Tuesdays, product and tech. Wednesdays, growth. Thursdays, fundraising. Second Friday of the month, it's normally legal and UK law, that is. And third Friday of the month, it's normally finances. They're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time. However, this week, because we are hosting these as official London Tech Week Fringe events, we're hosting both the legal and the finances today. So legal, as you can see, it started at 11 a.m. and the finances one will start at 2 p.m. We're only going to be here, though, for the next 44 minutes. And believe you me when I say that time flies way too faster than we'd like to. So my advice is if you do have any questions, don't leave it for too late. Please type your question in the chat and we'll give you the mic. Now, before we start taking questions, and whilst you're perhaps typing your questions down, maybe our lovely panelists here may want to give us their do's and don'ts when it comes to early stage legalities of a startup. Let's try and keep it to a minute each, please, panelists. And also let's try and use one do and one don't, but not the same reasoning basically behind it. And in the meantime, if you're not given the do and don'ts, maybe you want to drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat, because you see, in 4 years, we've had 280,000 people that have tuned in, and none of that would have happened without people like yourselves and your fellow panelists. So hopefully our audience can show some love and at least follow you on LinkedIn. Let's start with this from, let's start with Simon, then Ishita, then Graham, and then Andrew, please. One do, one don't. Your 1 minute of glory starts now, Simon.
Thank you. So I'll look at this from an intellectual property perspective, I think. So I think one do is make sure you're protecting your brand and your IP from the outset. So that should include, when you're hiring people, having the right employment contracts in place with the right clauses in there. If you're using external advisors, consultants, developers, making sure, again, the intellectual property that they're building for you is vesting with you as a company. And also making sure you as founders haven't created anything maybe pre-incorporation of the company that actually you own personally, because these are things that at funding rounds in the future, investors will look at and identify as issues, but also your value is in your brand in a technology related business. So protect it at all costs, get trademarks in place early, etc. And then in terms of a don't, I think I would say don't just think about the here and now. Think about your long-term strategy in terms of what are you trying to build. Is it a venture-backed company? Is it something that's more of a lifestyle business? And then plan with that exit or that long-term vision in mind. So it's a do that I've just turned into a don't. I don't just turned into a do, so apologies. But I think don't just sort of be in the here and now. Do think about the longer-term stuff as well.
Thank you very much, Simon. Ishita?
I'd say do formalize your business contracts early on in your company or startup journey. Whether you are bringing on board a co-founder or a tech developer or a freelancer to develop your, say, app or product, you need to have proper agreements in place which set out what their roles and responsibilities and obligations would be. What happens if there is a fallout? Many a times, people don't think through this, and they're happy to bring people on board, but they don't know what happens if the relationships don't work. So I think that's really important to set out in the agreement from the outset. The don't would be that because you've just founded your business, you're on a business journey, don't give away too much equity too soon, in your entrepreneurial journey in the business, because essentially giving away equity means giving away control. And if you're looking to get investment in the future, investors do look at your cap table really carefully. So yeah, and whether you're issuing shares or giving away shares on a handshake arrangement, whether it's to, again, tech developers or freelancers or people who are helping you build your product or platform, whether on a vesting schedule or a revesting basis or upfront. I mean, you have to consider carefully what your cap table will look like at the end of the day. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. In terms of do's, I think sort of a nice link to what was mentioned before about giving away equity. And one thing that a lot of companies do, and it makes complete sense, is granting share options to employees. And that's a good thing to do. But in terms of a do, it's quite common to grant these as EMI options, which are basically tax efficient share options. Won't go into too much detail about them. They are quite complex, but in short, it can give quite a large tax benefit to the employees that are exercising them. They probably like to pay a lot less income tax and capital gains tax. But the do is really do it properly in terms of taking advice and making sure that you dot all the I's and cross all the T's in terms of setting it up, making the relevant filings. Because when I've done M&A deals, often one of the most common issues that crops up is that the EMI scheme wasn't done properly, and that can result in hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of pounds of tax liabilities. And often that ends up falling on the founders in terms of eating into their sale proceeds. And it is quite a common issue that I see. So do take the proper advice and take that very seriously. And then don't, when you're raising investment, however early, don't, in my opinion, don't sign a term sheet without getting advice, either ideally from a lawyer or an experienced person in the industry, whether it's a Ned or someone else that's gone through it before. Although term sheets generally aren't legally binding, if they will set out the main terms of a transaction, and if you sign it without really knowing what you're signing up to, it's very difficult to go back on it, and you could end up giving away a lot to the investors or committing to terms that you ultimately regret. And often I see founders go, right, signed a term sheet, can you now help us with the round? And it's much better to get your advisors in a little bit earlier. You can get quite badly tripped up on that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And just before we go to Andrew, actually, I'll go one step ahead and I'll say, because I think you're being a bit nice, which is unusual and awful for a lawyer, Graham. But I'm saying, whatever you do, do not sign a term sheet without getting legal advice. Andrew.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Anton. Yeah, the challenge of going last is a couple of the thoughts I had have already been taken, but I'll do my best. On the do side, I think particularly where you may be a first time or early startup, and you may not have the sort of wealth of experience of a second, third time or exited founder. I think one area which is really helpful is to really get out into the startup community and really network. and by which I mean speaking to fellow founders who may have been there, done it, made some mistakes, etc., so that hopefully you can build up a sort of bank of knowledge, so that you understand, what the key terms are and any of the sort of key pitfalls are. And the other element to it is, as and when you're looking to start fundraising, trying to build up your investor network early on, whether that's in the context of angel network or institutional investors, because the more people you can get to know, the better. I think a lot of people call the venture game very much a network game. Aside from building the business, you need to know a lot of people and unlock some of those contacts. So that's one side of things, and working with things like accelerator programs, if that's appropriate, can also be a sort of valuable tool there. On the don't side, it slightly links to what Graham was talking around, fundraise term sheet. And forgive me if it sounds self-serving, but having a really strong advisory network is really important. So before you run and get overexcited by taking in funding from said fantastic angel who's well known in your industry, and or a VC, make sure you think carefully before you jump into taking in finance, because whilst it's very important in terms of looking to scale up your business, it's really important to make sure you've selected, not just the investor have selected the right type of investors, because you're gonna need to rely on them to a greater or lesser degree as part of the process as you go forward. And so I think
thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you very much to all four of you. Unfortunately, me and my fat thumbs with multitasking don't really go that well together. So we now have only 34 minutes to go, which means we've only got time for a few questions. Therefore, if you're tuning in via our live streams, whether that's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, I advise you to join us here on Microsoft Teams. It's audio only. Quickest way to get here is to go to our website, startup2scaleup.club. You find today's session, which is Startup Legal Q&A 05. Click join. A quick registration gets you a link to your email. Through that link, you can join us here. And then for those of you that are here and those that will make it here, all you have to do is type your question in the chat. We'll give you the mic and then you can ask our team. By the way, we are only able to express our opinion on UK law, so not other jurisdictions. Remember, this is only UK law, and but we're taking any questions to do with UK law. So whether that's on founder agreement, shareholder rights, incorporation, IP, term sheets, compliance, regulatory requirements, NDAs, employment laws, legal documents, templates, contracts, co-founder, investor, or board disputes, and all that jazz. There is literally no wrong questions, and there's no need to be shy. It's a learning curve for us all. If, however, your questions today are not on the legal side, and you've got other topics in mind, then fear not, because we run 6 regular events. Monday's talent, Tuesday's product and tech, Wednesday's growth, Thursday's fundraising. Normally the second Friday of each month it's law, and the UK law, that is, and the third Friday of each month normally it's UK finances. However, this week we're hosting all our sessions as official London Tech Week Fringes, and that means we're hosting today both the legal Q&A now at 11 and the finances Q&A will be at 2 p.m. By the way, you can RSVP and register to any future event via our site, startup2scaleup.club. And actually, when you go there, you might want to also join our community of on WhatsApp of founders, investors, and operators. We've got some nice groups there, and at the top and bottom of our site, there's WhatsApp icons you can click on. Now let's go on to the first question. This is one that was sent in to us, and then I'll unmute the other two that have put their questions in. This is on public sector procurement exclusivity clause. There's an opportunity to become a supplier for a public sector organization, but the contract includes an exclusivity clause that prevents us from supplying similar services to other public bodies or the duration of, for the duration of the contract. This seems to limit our business opportunities significantly. Are exclusivity clauses enforceable in public sector contracts? And what steps can we take to negotiate or challenge this legally? They are an AI training company. Well, I'm not a legal eagle, but I am pretty sure that they are very much enforced. But I'd love to hear from the legal experts here. What is their advice? In their opinion, what could one do to negotiate this better? So perhaps if we can start with Graham, then Ishita, then Andrew, and then Salmon, please. By the
Yes,
way,
no,
let's keep it to a minute each if we can, please, team.
yes, no problem. I'll be fairly brief because I mean I don't have a huge amount of experience with public sector organisations, but in terms of my 2 cents, from a contractual perspective, yes, exclusivity clauses can be enforceable. It's quite common for someone wanting you to be the exclusive supplier. It's right, but clearly from a business perspective, you need to make sure that works. If you can't sell to certain other businesses, does that make sense? Because obviously that reduces your revenue stream. From a sort of a practical perspective, it does seem a slightly odd provision because public sectors, to me, don't seem like they'll be in competition with each other. One council isn't necessarily in competition with another, so I'm not sure why they would necessarily need that. So from my perspective, I would push back on that clause.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not an expert with public sector contracts, but just on a high level, my opinion is that what is the rationale for having that exclusivity clause? Is it justifiable? What are the grounds? What's the reason that they want the exclusivity clause included, and what's the purview or the extent of that clause? It shouldn't restrict you from continuing your business activities in the sense that it becomes anti-competitive. So yeah, I mean, there would be a way to understand why it's there and how you can kind of create some sort of carve outs. Yeah.
Thanks, Ashita. Yeah, I think the first, I guess, key question to consider is how valuable that contract is. So commercially, what type of revenue stream are you going to derive from that contract? Because that's really the starting point about whether or not you're willing to accept some form of exclusivity. I think the second thing I would probably say is I'd look carefully at the scope of the exclusivity, because when we talk about similar services, if pushing back is not viable because you're not going to get the contract and it's their standard terms, quote unquote, I think you should look at the scope of those services to see if you can narrow them more appropriately so that it still allows you to potentially do business with certain other customer base that you may be targeting. That would be the second point I'd make. And related to that, I would also say you may wish to expressly carve out from that exclusivity certain areas, because you know absolutely you're going to have customer business in those other areas. I'd also look finally at what the duration of that contract is and how long that exclusivity applies for in that context.
Yeah, and I think everything's been covered very well so far. I think all really good points. So I think basically to give you sort of practical tips on what to do, I would say just speak to the local authority or the public sector body and say, look, why is this clause in here? What specifically are you trying to protect against? And if they say, oh, it's just our standard terms, we can remove it, then great. If they say it's non-negotiable, then again, it's that question of trying to narrow it if it's negotiable to an extent, if it can't be removed. But also it's a question of like, how valuable is this contract and how limiting is it to the rest of our business? Knowing public sectors a little bit, I think it's probably just a term in a standard contract that they probably can't articulate why it's in there or why it's important. So if you can articulate your rationale for either removing it or narrowing it significantly and saying, look, we will be going after this type of other public body, they don't overlap with you at all and they don't impinge on what we would do for you, then I think you'd probably, if they're acting reasonably, just get to a position where you can engage in the contract, and then look to do other things that you want to do as part of the business. I think that's the practical step I would take, is just engaging with the conversation with them about it.
Indeed, and just to chime in on what the legal experts have said, there's nothing wrong with you trying to go back to them and challenging that. But another thing worth remembering is this contract big enough for you? Because when you're a startup, sometimes one contract can make or break your business. So is this important enough and big enough? And is this lengthy enough? If it's something that you're going to be doing in a few weeks' time, and then you can, in the meantime, negotiate to start another contract, then that's fine. But it's worth having a little pushback without burning bridges. Right, here, thank you very much for that. We will now go on to some of the questions that the audience has put here. For those of you who've only got one name on the on your only one name here, unfortunately, it might be tricky to give you the mic because we can't even see who you are. But we'll start with Helen. Can you hear us, Helen? I've unmuted you. I've given you the mic. All right, let me see if I can make Helen a presenter instead. That normally helps. Helen Jones, made presenter. Can you hear us now, Helen? Yeah, hi. Please introduce yourself and fire away with your question, Helen.
Hi there, yes, my name is Helen Jones, and my question is, as per the chat, what specific legal issues need to be thought about when starting a company focused on AI, developing a new large language model? As one example, is there anything around potential IP or copyright infringement when training the model that needs to be sort of paid attention to? Is there anything else that the panel can think of that needs to be thought about that's specific to a company, a startup focused on AI?
Very good question, Helen. And by the way, can I ask you, at what stage are you at with that business, or is it an idea at the moment?
We're preparing to set up the limited company, so we're doing the groundwork at the moment.
Okay. And look, what I'm trying to get at, have you already started with a product roadmap or some kind of an MVP or anything like that, or?
At this stage, we're currently training the model. We have not gone further beyond that yet.
I see. Okay, well, that's a good enough step. Thank you very much for that. Okay, that's a very good question. Okay, how about this? We're going to start with this one. We'll start with Simon, then we'll go to Graham, then Andrew, and then Ishita, please. Let's try and keep it to a minute each, please, team.
Sorry, just finding my unmute button. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting and sort of cutting edge point in terms of law at the minute. I think your question framed it as, what, especially with training the model, what issues there might be there. So I think absolutely, potentially, there's issues with copyright owners if you're putting in data that isn't your third-party data or scraping data off the internet. There's several cases globally around this at the minute where creators and content and copyright owners are challenging the big AI companies on their rights to use, the copyright and the IP they have. I think I saw yesterday that big film producers are going after OpenAI and people. So I think definitely think about what inputs you have. Do you have the right to use those inputs to train the model. I think then sort of on a BAU basis, it's like who will own the things that if your customers will put additional information into the AI, who will own that? Who will own the outputs of that data? And again, will there be any potential IP infringements if those customers then go on to use that output in a way that you didn't envisage or something like that? I would say think also really carefully about privacy. What personal information are you putting in or potentially scraping or pulling out? And are you going to be compliant with the GDPR and privacy laws globally? And then I'd say the final point, and we'd need a bit more information to help you more specifically with this, is around the AI regulation. Is what you're building going to be triggered under that AI regulation as kind of like a high risk product or something? Would you be interfering with decision making and things? So I think it's looking at those elements and thinking, am I infringing others' IP? Do I own the IP that I'm building on top of potentially other existing models? Are there any privacy issues? And then, am I compliant with AI regulation? And do I need to put structured processes in place to be compliant? So I think that would be my really high level thoughts on it.
That's a very good point. And just before we go to the others, Alan, do you mind if I ask you what is it that this AI is going to be doing? Is it something in health or finance, or what field? What is it you're trying to do with it? Did you hear me, Ellen?
Hi, yes, I can. Yeah, at this stage, all I can say is that it is covering sort of a couple of different sectors.
Okay. No, because it would help the lawyers to give you a better advice. You don't have to tell us what it does, but at least whether it's in finance or HR or I don't know, whatever field it is, at least a sort of high level industry would help them to give you better answers.
Sure, I would say it's finance adjacent.
Okay, good stuff. I think we said the next one was going to be Graham. 1 minute, 1 minute to Andrew, and 1 minute to Ishita, please.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not going to spend too long. It's not an area I'm a specialist in, and I think Simon has probably covered most of the high level points. The only thing I would add, if it's sort of in finance, basically maybe just making sure that you don't have any issues with FCA, and just making sure whether you need to be authorized depending on what you do. Obviously, you need to understand a bit more about what kind of financial product it is, but that's probably the only thing I would add to Simon.
Thanks. Yeah, I think Simon, you probably covered many of the key areas. I think just on as a general point, I think practically as you're looking to develop these models, making sure that you have some watertight contractual relationships in terms of those who are contributing to the model. So on the employment / contractor side, both for any go forward providers of that work, and also any prior agreements that may or may not have been in place if applicable, making sure that the output is sitting neatly within the company is one key area. You might also want to delve into whether or not the IP that you're creating has any patentable ability, and even if not, one of the key protections around much of this is around trade secrets as well, of course. So having strong confidentiality NDA type provisions signed up with those involved, I think, is another key area.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And last but not least, Ishita, please.
Yeah, just on a high level, my high level thoughts on this would be, if you are collecting any sort of personal data of customers who are going to be using this platform or software, how do you handle their personal data, and how do you kind of process it? What's the lawful basis for doing that? All of that should be covered in your privacy policy. Also, in terms of the IP ownership, of the outputs, from the user prompts that might be generated, who owns the IP. So I think you need to have those kind of terms in your terms of service, and what would be the usage restrictions, etc. I'm just thinking on a more granular level. Also from a consumer perspective, if you will be offering, whether this is B2B or B2C, that's one thing, then maybe consumer laws might apply. So you will have to maybe then for each aspect where, who's your consumer base, as in your customer base, whether it's consumer or businesses, depending on that, you may have to add some sort of clauses in your terms of service to kind of allow them rights to terminate, etc. And also, if you're going to be using code from from other companies, whether it's open source, or are you going to be licensing that IP? I think all those pieces need to be kind of brought together and fixed. Yeah.
Thank you very much, all four of you. And 3 quick bits that I can add here, Helen. Number one, if and when you incorporate, and if you do that soon, the FCA, they get in touch with me with me, not because of me, but because of Startup to Scale Up Club, on a regular basis for their live testing on AI, for their sandboxing and so on. And I'm always open to sending people their way so that you can actually go and be part of these things with them. Happy to do that. Number 2, I check at the Information Commission. And number 3, if you are to use anybody's data within that training model, you definitely need to have somebody who's got some kind of GDPR certification. And there are various places you can get one for little money and for not a lot of training. I think the one I got because of my HR work, can't remember, it was in one of these job boards actually, CV Library or something, I think it was, and a year or 2 ago, and all I did was spend 5 hours studying, and then they tested me for like 90 minutes, and when I passed it, I got the certificate. So these 3 things I would definitely look into exploring further. I hope that helps, Helen.
It does. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Best of luck, and thank you very much. We now have only 13 minutes to go, so not a lot of time. So let's try and be a bit quick. Sriji, can you hear us? Are you audible? Giving you the mic, Sriji. Can you hear us?
PG.
Hi.
Hi.
Please introduce yourself quickly and then fire away with your questions, Richie.
Yes. So my name is Shiji. I'm coming from the US. I have a hardware firmware startup. I'm not yet incorporated in the US, but I'm looking to doing that, but also interested in incorporating in the UK. I was wondering if I needed a lawyer to incorporate in the UK, or can I just incorporate on Companies House website? Any advice on that, and what the general cost of incorporating with the lawyer in the UK? For example, in the US, it seems like the average to incorporate an S-Corp with the lawyer in the US is $2,000 to $3,000. And I'm speaking about incorporating an S-Corp if that's the equivalent in the UK.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That's a very good question, Sriji. In my experience, I'll pass you on to the lawyers, but in my experience, you don't necessarily need a lawyer. I mean, it depends what you're doing, but it does really help if you do have somebody who is based or a resident in the UK to be a representative. But let's hear it from Andrew, then Graham, then Ishita, then Salmon. Quickly, any advice if you can, please, team.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Siji, for the question. Yeah, I agree with Anton. In order to actually set the company up itself, you don't need a lawyer for that necessarily. It's a pretty straightforward process. Like in the UK, in the US, you can do that through Companies House online and pay a very, very small fee, a lot less than 2 to 3K, that's for sure, to set up a company as a standard limited liability company, limited company we call it. And you just set up with a model standard off-the-shelf set of articles of association. So to set up the 100% based company, that's easy. I think where any legal etc. comes in is more about what you want to do in terms of if it's just yourself, or are you going to be creating a relationship with, say, a co-founder initially, and or then taking any fundraising in from external capital, whether that's angels or institutional investors. That's when you need to start thinking about your corporate documents, so shareholders agreement, subscription agreement, that type of stuff, and any of the foundational documents like employment contracts and such like. Just the final point I'd add is, again, around what the share capital profile looks like. If you're thinking about doing things like equity incentive plans and such like, there are a number of online providers that can help with that type of process. But from experience, I think it can be helpful to have a lawyer involved in that process, but then maybe working with some of the platforms to handle the administration side of those things, because there's a corporate but also sort of tax element to some of these things, and there are some intricacies, particularly if you've got a UK-US element going on.
Indeed, and I think the next one we said Graham, and Graham, if you want to clarify, I believe you still need a physical address where the incorporation letters need to go to in the UK. Is that right?
Yes, you have a UK address, sort of registered office address. That's right. So I don't have a huge amount to add what Andrew was saying. I mean, it's right. You can set it up very, very cheaply. Yeah, if you want the kind of comfort of a professional doing it, because they're maybe more familiar with it, then it can be done. It can be done probably a lot less than 2K. It can probably be done for a few £100 for sort of company secretarial services. So that's still obviously quite a bit. But if you wanted that comfort, that can be done. I think the things that sort of just to add to Andrew is so whether it's going to be kind of this UK company is going to be a subsidiary of a US company, or it's going to be the kind of a new holding company. So if it's a subsidiary, then that's all quite straightforward. You just put the US company sort of really as the shareholder. But if you're sort of flipping up, there's just a little bit. You can still set the company up on Companies House with a little bit more complexity, where you have to sort of do share for share exchange documents and to kind of swap your shares in the US company for the UK company. And there's maybe just a couple of tax things to think about. Yeah.
Indeed, thank you very much. So, Ishita?
Yeah, I agree with Andrew and Graham. They've covered most of the points. Just to add there, if you're thinking of setting up a subsidiary in the UK, there's a concept called persons with significant control, which essentially means that, they want to know who the ultimate person is who's holding the shares in the company. So that may require some professional help. So you may need to, speak to a lawyer just to get clarity on what sort of information you need to disclose. But it's not a very complicated process, pretty straightforward. And like Graham mentioned, it can be done in a few £100.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Simon, anything to add here?
Nothing to add on that stuff. I guess aligned to it is just, obviously, if you're thinking about operating in the US and the UK, obviously it's worth taking tax advice as well, and thinking about how the funds flow through the two businesses. But I think the setup stuff's been covered.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Suji, whilst a lawyer is obviously a much better option, another thing you can do is go to what they're called formation or company formation organizations. You can go to them and they can help you with that. They can help you with a bank account, which you need. They can help you with a registered office, with which you need, and all that jazz. That otherwise, if you're not living in the UK, it's not undoable, but it's a bit difficult to navigate. So if you go to these formation companies, for little money, they can do all of that for you. And unless you have other kind of specifications and kind of complications, then probably at this stage anyway, it's not kind of adamant to have a lawyer. I hope that helps, Sajid.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Very good. You're very welcome, and best of luck. And please do feel free to join us again. I think our next one was, where is it? RR. Who's RR? Because I have to now check the names here. RR was Roberto. Roberto, can you hear us? I think I might need to make Roberto a presenter, because maybe the browser back there. Can you hear us, Roberto?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, buddy. Take it away. Quick intro, because we've only got 5 minutes, and then please go ahead with your question, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Anton, and the panel for taking my question. I'm Roberto Ritchie. I co-founded a deep tech startup quite a few years ago. I've been involved in quite a few funding rounds, and my lawyers, or the company's lawyers, would regularly remind me that they represent the company and not the founders. So my question is, would you recommend founders engaging their own counsel during a funding round? And if so, why? And what are the key areas that a founder should focus on from a personal perspective?
Wow, that is a very freaking good question. Thank you very much for that, Roberto. I see this all the time, and yes, legally, their best interest is the company. But I'd love to hear from the lawyers. I'm going to reserve my opinion on this for now. I'd love to hear from the lawyers what their opinion is on this. So maybe we can start with Ishita. We can then go to Andrew, then Salmon, and last but not least, Graham, please. We've only got 4 minutes to go, team. So let's see what we can do.
Yeah, sure. Great question, Roberto. Definitely, I would recommend the founder to take their own, engage their own independent legal counsel for this, because in certain situations, you have to see yourself as a separate party than to the company. So investors are investing in the company is growing and scaling, the funds are going to be used for that purpose. But as a shareholder, where you own, a portion of the shares, you have rights in the company, which are right to vote, as well as to receive dividend, and also to get a return on the capital in the event of winding up. So those are your rights that are typically attached to ordinary shares. Now, when you receive investment in the company, depending on what percentage you hold in the company, you'll be able to vote on matters which are ordinary resolution matters, which means matters requiring more than 50% of the votes of the members present and voting, and special resolution matters which require more than 75%. 75% or more. So now, depending on how much you hold in the company, you have these voting rights if you have been issued voting shares. So that kind of gives you control in the company. Now, when investors come, they generally have something called reserved voting matters, which means that certain matters can't be decided without their prior consent. Now, whether having those kind of rights in the shareholders' agreement conflict with your rights as, say, a minority shareholder. I'm just assuming. So assuming you're a minority shareholder. So yeah, and there can be a conflict of rights, and documents can get complicated. So it's always best to seek advice, have your own lawyer review from your lens as a party and as a owner of the company. Yeah.
Indeed, thank you very much for that. Andrew.
I don't think we got long, and I think it's a really good question, which probably warrants a little more than 1 minute 50 seconds. But I think it's always an interesting sort of conflict point, I guess, in a sense. But you're quite right. Obviously, if you're acting on the company side, your advice is to the company, not the founders, and there can be a little bit of a merging of that interest, particularly where the founders are the main people involved. I think that obviously the ideal world is getting independent advice, but the reality is when you're in startup world, it's very unlikely that you're going to get separate independent advice unless there's a particularly good reason to do so. So, for example, there is some kind of sensitive issue into founder, or there may be a changing of the guard. So where there's sort of real sort of serious into founder concerns, that I think is where you would, practically speaking, start to get advice separately. I also would say that, practically speaking, I don't think there's any harm in speaking to your company counsel and being very open and saying, I just want to understand a certain provision from a personal perspective, because I think any practical lawyer and commercial lawyer would be very happy to give their views, but subject to that caveat. But the areas to think about are things like the lever provisions in terms of employment and equity position. That's probably the biggest thing. And then as the business starts to scale up and founders control starts to reduce, again, that's the area where that process comes in. But a good company counsel, I would say, would always be looking to try and navigate a middle way where it's good for the company, but hopefully it's also appropriate for the founders who are key to the business.
Indeed, that's what a good counsel would do. Graham, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I appreciate the timing. So ideal world, yes, if you got all the money and time, you'd have separate counsel. But in reality, that doesn't happen. 99% of rounds that I work on, founders wouldn't get separate counsel. And the way we deal with it is, yes, if I act for the company, but we would sort of obviously go through those provisions that could be relevant, whether it's lever provisions, whether it's director appointment rights. We wouldn't necessarily advise and say you should do this or should do that, but we would kind of obviously explain what it means and how it affects different people, including yourself. And a smart founder would come up with their view on that, and then instruct the company counsel whether to sort of push back on a point on that basis. So conscious of time, but yeah, that's just what I see.
Thank you very much. Simon, any thoughts on this?
I think that everyone's covered it very well, and in the interest of time, I'll leave it with that.
Brilliant. I hope you found it helpful, Roberto. There's two questions in the chat. One, it's about investing in holding companies. If you want detailed answers, join us next Thursday. We'll have some amazing investors that can go into detail. But in my experience, investors, unless you've done really well before, or if you know them, they don't like investing in holding companies. The other question was IP. Yes, if you've got the money to register trademarks and IPs and all that stuff internationally, you can go ahead. But unless you've got a cure for cancer or some kind of special machinery that makes cars run on water, one thing I've learned is that there's more often than not, people will find a way to get around those IPs and what you have. So focus on building. That would be my advice. And with that in mind, if my team has got time to give us some parting words, I'd really appreciate it. And I'm sorry I've kept you over the 1 hour that I'd asked you. So perhaps we can start with the lady of the house, and then Andrew, who is for the first time here, and then Graham and Simon, please.
Well, it was a great session. It was lovely chatting with you and discussing those questions. I had a great time. Just a word of advice: don't wait for funding rounds to get your legals in order. Start now, I would say. And if you need any help with any legal questions, incorporations, etc., just feel free to shout out to me on LinkedIn. My link is in the chat box. And yeah, have a lovely weekend, everyone.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thanks. Yeah, well, thank you, Anton, for inviting me on. Yeah, first go at this, so enjoy doing the Q&A, and you can find me on LinkedIn under Andrew Pannell at Haynesboon. And yeah, very happy to answer some initial questions if anything comes up. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Graham.
Thanks, Anton. Thanks everyone for their questions. Great questions. Sorry, we didn't have more time. Also happy to answer any of these questions offline. I've dropped my LinkedIn link into the chat. And yeah, good luck with everyone's fundraising journey, and good luck with everyone's startup.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Simon, please.
Yeah, just to say thanks to everyone for listening. If there's unanswered questions, around any of the stuff we've talked about where I can help, I'm happy to do so on LinkedIn. Please do reach out. And like I say, we specialize in plugging lawyers into companies at a really reasonable price early on, so you can avoid making costly mistakes. I think that's a really good approach, to have fractional advice early on, which doesn't cost much and gives you comfort that you're building in the right way. So I would say, if you want to talk about that, I'd love to.
Thank you very much. Huge thanks to everyone that tuned in today. Those of you that did it via the live streams, whether it's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, apologies, we're not able to monitor your questions there live. Obviously, thank you to everyone that tuned in here on Microsoft Teams on the live audio. And huge thanks to everyone that's submitted questions. Sorry we couldn't get through to everyone's in detail, but please remember, next time, literally as soon as you join the session, when you see what the topic of the session is, please type your question, because that way we can get through more questions and in more detail. Now, just a quick reminder, in a couple of hours we will be running our last London Tech Week event, and this will be our Startup Finances Q&A. It's for UK finances and startups. We'll have some amazing CFOs and I think one or two accountants as well. But in general, we run 6 regular events. They're all free and they're all paneled with some of the top people in our ecosystem. Mondays it's talent, Tuesdays product and tech, Wednesdays growth, Thursdays fundraising, second Friday of each month it's UK startup law, and third Friday of each month it's UK startup finances. You can register to any future events via our site, startuptoscaleup.club. And when you're actually there, what you might want to do is also join our WhatsApp community, which is groups of founders, investors, and operators. I've put the link here in the chat. At the top and bottom of our site, we've got the WhatsApp icons that you can join. In terms of my parting words, just remember the startup journey can be both exciting but also quite challenging. So try to have some fun in the meantime and be kind to yourself and everyone else for that matter too. Otherwise, hopefully we'll see you all in a couple of hours for Startup Finances Q&A. If not, have a great weekend and God bless you all. Bye-bye for now.